A lot of people have been comparing the 2008 financial crisis to the housing market today, and I don't think that's a very fair assessment because you have to understand what 2008 did and what 2022 is doing, that we understand how they're different and how they're similar at the same time. So 2008, the whole financial market meltdown was triggered by the real estate market, the housing market. So the housing market started with these three things: the housing market bubble and bust. You had first ninja loans, which stood for no income, no job, no asset loans, meaning if you didn't have an income, you didn't have a job, you didn't have any assets, and you walked into the bank saying, I want a $200,000 loan to buy a home, they would say, no problem. You can get a home with 0% down. 0% down payments were very popular. In fact, they had some loans where you could get 110% loan to value loans, meaning if a home is $100,000, they wouldn't just give you 80 grand or 90 grand or 100 grand. They would give you $110,000 to cover your closing costs, to cover your move-in costs, because everybody thought home prices could never go down. So banks were literally giving you free money to go out and buy a home because everybody thought home prices could not go down. Then you had subprime mortgages as well, which was where you had a very low credit score. You should not have qualified for a mortgage, but banks were able to give you the subprime loans, meaning loans with a higher interest rate, and they were able to find ways to give you loans even though you shouldn't have gotten one. And then you had the adjustable rate mortgages, which is what we're seeing right now, which is where you would get a low teaser rate in the beginning. So you'd have a very low mortgage rate for the first few years, and then as interest rates went up, the mortgage rate readjusted, and then all of a sudden you were slapped with a much higher mortgage rate that you couldn't afford, and this get a lot of people in trouble. And then you had the Wall Street issue. The Wall Street issue was, now banks were making all these mortgages, and everybody on Wall Street said, well, let's get in on the fun too. So then everybody on Wall Street started chopping up these mortgages, selling them as different investments and as different securities, and this went on and on and on. This created this huge domino effect, so that when the housing market started to fall because of these three things, then Wall Street essentially was on the verge of collapsing. But it started with the housing market. In 2022, our economic slowdown is not being caused by the housing market, it's being caused because of inflation. So a very different trigger. Yes, we have adjustable rate mortgages today. Nowhere near what we saw before the 2008 crash yet. However, adjustable rate mortgages are growing, and we do have, everything going on with Wall Street, but we do not have the subprime lending. We do not have the same ninja loans the way that we did before the 2008 crash. So what does this mean? Well, the economic issues today are different than the economic issues that led to the 2008 crash, because in 2008, it was the real estate bubble that triggered the dominoes into everything else. The worry today is that the inflation domino could trigger more dominoes to fall, because now with this whole inflation issue, we have the cost of everything so high. So people can't afford basic things. They can't afford the same lifestyle that they had a couple years ago. They can't afford the same lifestyle they had a few years ago. And so inflation is starting to cool down the economy. And if that continues, and businesses start to slow down, businesses start to lay people off, that means that unemployment would also rise. And now, if we cannot get inflation under control, however, unemployment keeps rising, so people are losing their jobs, the price of things are high, people will not be able to pay their mortgages then. If people cannot pay their mortgages, well then that creates the next domino, which is the real estate market. So there's a lot of different things that you have to pay attention to. There's a lot of different factors, because right now you have some people saying, oh, the real estate market is going to collapse just like 2008. Well, that's not how it works, because there's so many different factors. And then people say, oh, well, inflation is just going to get better because of the Fed. Well, maybe, maybe not. There's a lot of things that you have to pay attention to. But ultimately, if you want to get a direction of where the housing market is going, there's one thing that you have to pay attention to. And I talk about this a lot now, but you really want to pay attention to this, because the Fed is going to be the biggest determining factor as to what's going to happen with home prices, because everybody says, oh, home prices are going to correct. But that's not necessarily true, because if the Fed doesn't keep raising interest rates, well then home prices could crash upwards. So what this means is the Fed, the Federal Reserve Bank, is in charge of the monetary system. They can control interest rates. Right now, they are working to raise interest rates. The reason why is because when you raise interest rates, It's a way to fight inflation. It's a way to cool inflation down. And right now, at the time of me making this video, inflation is the top priority for the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, this is their top priority because our economy, in the Fed's eyes, is still very strong because people have jobs, because unemployment is low. And that might not stay the way that it is now. So if the Fed for the next few months continues to raise interest rates, but then the economy starts to slow down and unemployment starts to go up, well, then the Fed might stop being so aggressive with the rate hikes. And this is something that you want to pay attention to because jobs are kind of a lagging indicator because the job market will take some time to adjust to what's going on in the economy because businesses don't want to lay people off, right? They don't want to fire people. They don't want to let people go. They don't want to slow down their growth until they're forced to do so. Business owners, CEOs, they're not economists. They want to grow the business as fast as possible. So they're not trying to predict what's going to happen in the future. They're looking at the cash in their bank and then they're saying, okay, what can we do to grow the business as fast as possible? So the biggest indicator that you want to pay attention to when it comes to the housing market is the Fed. If the Fed continues to raise interest rates for the next 6 to 12 months, you can expect home prices to start going down. However, if the Fed at some point, whether it's 6 months, whether it's 12 months, whether it's 18 months, the fight on inflation, if the fight on inflation doesn't completely get better, if inflation doesn't stay down at 2%, but the Fed says, okay, we've brought down inflation from 9% to a more manageable number, let's just say 5%, which is still extremely high. But then they say our bigger issue now is the unemployment. It's the economy. It's the asset prices falling. Well, then what the Fed may consider doing is cutting interest rates. If you enjoyed this short clip from my longer videos, here's another clip that I think you'll love. And while you're at it, if you're interested in learning more about how to start generating passive income, our team put together an amazing guide that goes over what passive income is, how to start generating passive income, and different passive income strategies. These are things that you can start doing even if you don't have a lot of money. So if you want to read this free guide on how to start generating passive income for free, all you got to do is click that button right over there. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep hustling.